Welcome to Let Me Know How It Is, a podcast about all things geek. We're examining the concept of shock value in media today. If you're new to the show, thanks for joining us. We release new episodes every Wednesday. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Thanks for listening. All right. Hey, fellas. We are doing shock value today. Shock value in all media. I am Zach Slater.
I'm Frank Melman.
This is Tommy Smithereens.
And I'm Clifton.
All right. So I've come across some unfortunate news that I want to let you guys know. I have found out that Darth Vader is, in fact, my father.
What? That's impossible.
So silly.
So that's what we mean. That's what we mean by shock value. Something that is, put in a story, put in a show, put in a movie, a comic book, whatever, that is deliberately meant to surprise the audience, to throw them for a loop. So,
I think a good way, we were thinking more about it. I think a good way to describe it is if you watch, we see reaction videos all the time, right? Like that's the thing we get is like, granted, it could just be a trailer, it could be a video game or whatever, but still, like people make video. Again, speaking of Empire Strikes Back and the reveal of Vader being Luke's father, there's lots of people that still record to this day, their kids' reactions to seeing that for the first time, because it's a big deal if you don't know it's coming, right?
Right.
So think of it that way. That's the kind of moment we're looking for. Is like it would be something like for kids nowadays, it would be something that would be a reaction type video moment.
Yeah, definitely. I think, and for me, like it's an interesting thing. So it's something that I think comes along only for like long form pieces of media, right? So like Star Wars is a series, serialized television shows, comic books, and everything. Things were like they have the audience for like the long haul, right? I think that that's the moments where shock value kind of is the most effective. Right? Because, I feel like that there's a need for it in those instances too, right? Because like you got to keep it fresh, right?
Right. Well, I mean, it's one of those things where it's funny that you mentioned that because again, thinking about doing the production, the production work for this episode, I was thinking about it, and Lost is one of those things where originally Michael Keaton was supposed to be on Lost, right? Like in the pilot, like he was supposed to be like, he was supposed to be one of those things where, why would Michael Keaton, this movie star, decide to be in a TV show? And that was supposed to give it some cachet. And he was only supposed to be in the pilot, and he was supposed to die before the first episode. So you kind of felt like anyone could die.
Right.
and then they, for whatever reason, he didn't sign. And then sort of Matthew Fox got that role of being like the guy, being Jack, being the leader. And like the only other time that I know of where they planned to do something along those lines was, I know one of the original Buffy pilots, they had a kid named Jesse who was supposed to be like in the credits as part of the Scooby gang, and he gets turned like in the first episode or the second half of the pilot.
Right.
And originally that was one of those things where it was going to be like a huge shock that, you think Jesse's part of the gang and he's going to be around for all these adventures, and no, he gets turned and dusted by the end of the whole thing. So
yeah. Yeah, no, Lost is a good example of that. Yeah, because I do remember hearing about that. The Michael Keaton stuff I forgot about completely, actually. But I do remember hearing that the Matthew Fox character was initially supposed to like die before the end of the first episode, and then it was like they were going to die. He was going to die before the end of the first season, and it seemed like they kept like pushing it over. Like they liked the idea of killing off the protagonist to sort of. Right. To make you feel that the rest of the cast isn't safe at any point.
No, because at one point, like I'd heard the thing with Michael Keaton that was like a big deal. They was trying to like make it look like they got somebody who's a bigger star. And
it is funny to think of a time when your movie people never crossed over with your TV people. That was unheard of
at that time. Yeah,
that's preposterous.
Yeah, TV was.
Then it was like Kiefer Sutherland, really only, right?
Yeah,
he might be one of the first ones. Yeah,
yeah.
But no, it was the other thing that I heard before they had added Matthew Fox was the idea of it was going to be Michael Keaton. Michael Keaton was like, obviously the de facto leader because he had the star power, and then he would die like 45 minutes in, and then Kate was supposed to take over as the de facto leader of this group, the ragtag group of survivors, of Oceanic 815. So, but it didn't work out that way. But still, it's one of the things where I think as a shock value moment, it could have worked.
Right.
You know, they do have a moment where they're trying to get people together after the plane crash. It's kind of chaos. You know, it's a great open, and some guy gets sucked right into a turbine that's still working.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, they have moments like that, but it's not something where it was, you know, we didn't know that person's story or what that character was about. So not as quite a big deal. I do agree with you. I think generally it's got to be long term. It has to be something where, you know, you don't expect to come in, or you got to keep the show fresh or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
You have to establish a status quo before you can shake up a status quo.
Yeah,
Correct.
Exactly.
Right.
Not that it's impossible to do in 22 minutes. I think it's possible, but it's definitely a lot harder. Like, I mean, that's got to be a lean story.
Sure.
You know what I mean? But, you know, I would think though, you know, episodes of Twilight Zone have done it,
Right.
you know, and have done it pretty effectively, I think.
What, shock value?
Well, I mean, because I think that there's an essence of the twist ending that I think kind of fits into this a little bit. Right?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, I know Frank was talking about Lost, but to me, the crowning one of that is HBO's Game of Thrones,
Okay.
in which we've never seen death so gratuitous
Sure.
and so hard as when someone met their demise. It didn't matter who got it. It was always a spectacle.
Well, I mean, it's one of those things where in the first season you expect, are we going to ruin it or are we not going to ruin it?
I say ruin it because
Yeah, who cares?
So, okay.
Spoiler alert for Game of Thrones. There we go.
Spoiler alert for Game of Thrones.
But you guys have all seen it.
Yeah, go watch season 1 and then come back.
yes.
Right.
If you haven't seen season 1, but we're about to spoil that part. No, when Ned Stark, you know, who you think is, you know, obviously it's Sean Bean, right? So you wouldn't think he's going to make it anyhow, but
Yeah.
because it's a meme and a thing that's been going on since then or before then. But the idea being that you think Ned Stark is surely going to, you know, survive his situation, and
yes.
you know, no, they murdered him in front of the entire kingdom practically. You know, they lop his head off. You know, I remember the day the night that it aired. You know, luckily I wasn't on the internet. You know, I remember someone, it might have been you, Tommy. You might have asked me, "Have you seen it? Have you seen it yet?"
Probably.
And I was like, "No." You're like, "Go watch it. Go watch it. Call me back." I'm like, "All right." But I remember, you know, it was one of those things where I remember I had a friend of our friend Dan. I remember at one point he's like, surely someone's going to come in on horseback and fire an arrow, and then they're going to ride off together, and you know they're going to save poor Ned. And no, no, it doesn't. I mean, it's a nice callback to the beginning when he has to cut the other guy's head off, like on their family land, the guy that deserts his post. But yeah, that's one of those that I definitely think for a huge shock value, because I do think you're invested in that character and you think it's going to be his story, and it's so not. Granted, he looms over the series, but it's not his series.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you should go back to the first episode because they do it not even in death. When you find out that the brother and sister are incestuous, you know?
Yeah.
Just one more
That's a good point.
Yeah, it wasn't enough to just mention it. You have to actually see them together. and on top of that, they were seen by a child.
Right.
Yeah.
Who they then push out the window.
Yes.
Also,
yes.
Another little bit of it there too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's funny that you mentioned that topic because I remember at the time you're like, "Oh, HBO. I think HBO's gone too far.
Yeah.
I don't know about this incest and a kid." And I was like, "Okay." And then 3 episodes in, you're like, "Yeah, you should probably watch this show."
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
So, but yeah, that's a good one. That's another good.
It
good
is
example.
a good one. I think it's an effective one, actually. I think back then, I mean, you know, whatever your opinion on what the show became down the road and everything, I think that like Sean Bean is such like a perfect person to cast, right? Thinking to Michael Keaton in Lost. I can't believe how much we're talking about Lost, right? But in essence,
Right.
I think that would not have worked if it was him, right? Because I think if he died at the end of the first episode, everybody I think would then go like, well, of course, like some big movie star's not going to stay for a show,
Right.
So like, right? In essence, it would be kind of a tell that they got somebody so big. But Sean Bean is this actor that certainly people know by name, right? But he's not, he doesn't lead his own movies, generally speaking. He's in the background of somebody else, right? Somebody else is the headliner, right?
Right. Sure.
And so he's kind of a perfect actor that's this perfect blend of like, oh, like he got a TV show. Certainly he's great enough to lead his own show.
Right.
Right. And
Yep.
then at the end, it's also like, well, yeah, geez, okay, of course.
Right. So
of course he's going to go do other things. And I think that he was just such a perfect like weight to the character. Thought we were going to be with him long term, right? Cared for him, and then when he's taken away from us, it's what do we do?
Right.
You know, which I always think it's an effective. I'm always impressed when writers are able to sort of like pull the rug out from under us and they take the protagonist away. They take the hero away. A big example for this, we're going to spoil a lot in this episode.
Yeah.
But like Psycho for me, Psycho is one of my favorite movies of all time. That shower scene when the hero dies essentially, and the screenwriters are super smart to like, after that happens, they're just throwing information at you, like right after another, just like boom, 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 like anything to kind of keep you engaged, to kind of quell that, like, well, geez, now what do we do?
Yeah,
you know.
Sure.
And I think Game of Thrones did something similar that way, where like there was, a big enough cast of characters and enough going on that you were hooked at that point.
Right. Sure.
Yeah.
Would you consider the reveal at the end of the first episode of The Mandalorian a shock value thing?
Refresh my memory.
I would think so. I think it's one of those things where, it's, as big as the child has become in pop culture since Mandalorian premiered. I would say, I don't know if it's so much shock value as it is one of those, it's a shocking moment of like, oh, that's cool. Because again, you still don't know after that first episode whether or not it's another one of Yoda's people.
Yeah.
Or if it's set in like, that moment of, was it set in a time where Yoda could have possibly been, but no, because they're like, 700 years old or whatever.
Yeah.
So that's not going to work. But
okay, so that was the reveal. That first one was Baby Yoda, right?
Yes.
Right. The reveal is that his target is a Baby Yoda.
Right.
Mm.
Okay.
Yes.
Right. Yes.
Got it.
Yes.
Not for me, because I watched it a couple of months after it came out. And by that point, Baby Yoda was kind of all over the
everywhere.
place. And so I kind of knew which way to lean at that point.
Okay.
For that one. So I don't have the best opinion. I'm not the best person to answer that question, but you guys, Cliff and Frank, that you watched it as it came out. What did you guys think?
I mean, I think I don't know if it's so much shock value as it's one of those things of like, oh, that's surprising. Like you think it might be, I don't think I thought it was a person or a living thing. I thought it might've been cargo for a first episode. I thought they wouldn't set up that much in the first episode.
Okay. Another thing that got me is an old movie. And I don't think I don't want to discuss it because it's still jarring to this day, but it's so much part of pop culture that people forget where it came from.
Okay.
Like, if I say the words, "You got a pretty mouth," what does that make you think of any movie?
Yeah. That's a big one.
That's a huge one. Yeah. I don't think anyone got over.
No.
It's just,
right.
No.
In fact, it makes the movie.
Yeah.
What's it from though?
Deliverance.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that and dueling banjos are the two things.
Yeah.
From that movie, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Squeal
that's
like a pig.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, that scene alone is. Ugh.
Yeah. No, that's. I mean,
that was an optional novel to read when I was in high school.
Really?
Was it really?
Deliverance?
Wow.
Really?
Yep.
Oh, wow.
Where did you go? Wow. Okay.
The teacher had to apologize, but
as you should.
It was on the optional reading list.
Jeez.
Oh wow, jeez. Well, one of a lighter tone for more of our fans would be the third movie. Was it Revenge of the Sith?
Mm-hmm.
Where Anakin has to kill a bunch of kids.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't enough to kill all the Jedi. He had to kill the baby ones first.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, that was a tough one to come back from.
I agree.
Yeah.
Wasn't enough to be a turncoat,
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
You meant to say younglings.
Yes,
Younglings.
he did kill younglings.
Yes.
Ooh.
So this jumped into my head thinking about the Baby Yoda thing, right? And maybe it's shock value, maybe it's not. Does shock value have degrees?
It can't.
Are there big instances of shock value and smaller ones?
Yes.
I think it's degrees in the sense that how much. I mean, you could have a moment of like, it happened, and then there's moments of like, oh my god, my mouth was like your mouth drops open from what did I just see? Those kind of moments. So
yeah.
And for Baby Yoda, like, it was shocking, but my thinking at the time was like, okay, here's the hook. Like, this is the hook of the show now, because we didn't know what the hook was.
Right.
Yeah.
Besides, like, yeah, it's a bounty hunter. Yeah, we've seen that. But like now we know what makes this show different.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just Boba Fett adjacent.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that it does come in levels. So for me, I think a very like lower level one, especially now looking back. I don't know what it was like during its release, but Dark Knight Returns, I think Carrie Kelly is one of those like deliberately supposed to shock a little bit. I think a lot of that book is deliberately supposed to shock, but I think just the fact that it's like Robin's a girl,
right? Sure,
right?
Yeah, I mean, at that time, what do you who's been Robin at that point, right?
Yeah,
no,
yeah, exactly.
You know, you had, was it Dick and Jason? That's it.
Yeah,
those two. You know, so even then, and then, you know, it's Carrie Kelly's a big departure from what had been before. So yeah, I could see that. That's a good one. I hadn't really thought about that one, but that's a pretty good one.
Yeah, I mean, I think that book is so rife with things that are meant to shock.
Right.
You know, I think done well. I think done very, very well.
Sure.
But I think also, like, I mean, you know, when you're the first out of the gate like that for that type of story, for that kind of book, that's gonna, you know, we're gonna take this beloved thing and we're gonna completely just turn it on its side in every which way.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
I mean, conversely, you could argue that the ending of Watchmen, the book, the comic, is pretty shocking. The idea that, you know, I mean, if you haven't read Watchmen, go take your time and read that, and then come back for this one.
Which now larger audiences will know as the precursor to the TV show Watchmen.
Right. The HBO
as
show.
the
right.
setup for the series.
Right. So if you haven't read Watchmen, the series by Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons, the maxi series, the idea that, you know, that Rorschach and Night Owl or Dan and Rorschach are on their way to this Arctic, you know, hideout that Ozymandias has, and they think they're going to be, you know, they're in, you know, in a superhero trope, they're going to save the day and swoop in and confront him, you know, and basically stop his big huge plan, you know, and he doesn't do the bit of monologuing with them. He just tells them, "No, I did it half an hour ago."
yeah.
Basically, you guys wasted your time. It's over. There's nothing you could do. It's, you know, it's pretty much done. That kind of ending, if you don't know it's coming, is a pretty big, you know, especially the fallout of it, and literally and figuratively the idea that, you know, he does pull off his plan and he does, in a sense, win. If you see the Watchmen show, the HBO show, it's, you know, you could argue whether he wins or doesn't win. But yeah, I think that one always, to me, was, I remember reading it for the first time. I remember someone left it at the place that I worked. I worked at a movie theater and I got to read it on my break. So that's how I first read Watchmen.
Oh, really?
And I remember
I never knew that.
Yeah, I remember. Well, it was one of the things where I was, you know, I had a point in my life where it was, if I didn't recognize the character, I didn't want anything to do with it. Shocking,
sure.
You know, shocking. But yeah, that was one of those where Watchmen, I remember someone offered it to me when I was in the comic shop. I'm like, no, I'm good. And then came back to it later and bought it. But yeah, I remember that I got to that point and was like, oh my God, what's going to happen now? Because Ozymandias got away with it, right? So that's what, to me, is, especially when you're talking about big series from like 86, 87, you know, one being Dark Knight Returns and the other being Watchmen. That's, to me, a really big, you know, shock moment.
Right. Yeah, I could see that one too. Yeah, that one's almost like shock value, like tangentially to me, right? Because I think that the thing that most motivates that scene is the idea of, it's like, of, we're just flipping the convention, right?
Right. Absolutely.
You know, like you said, like this is the way all superhero stories end, and I'm just gonna flip that a little bit. But yeah, but in doing so, like, it is a shocking thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, good book.
Yeah.
Read Watchmen.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, comics. I think. I mean, well, no, we can argue about whether or not TV does it more or less now, but I feel like comics, like, really has had a point where they were like using it as a crutch.
Sure.
You know, I mean, just the ads at the end of every issue were like, you know, come back for the shocking, like, everything is good. Like, I don't know how many times Marvel has claimed that, everything we know about the Marvel universe will change.
Right.
It was almost at the end of every month.
Sure. But I think when I think of like, big shocking stuff, when I think about Marvel's, to me, it's like, what is it? Amazing Spider-Man 121 and 122, which
Gwen?
is, yeah. If again, we're talking, what were those books, like 68 when they came out? You're talking, 50 some odd years, but I defy you to go read that run up to that point and then get to that issue and then have it be that, again, spoiler alert, she dies, and then there's the great debate about was she already dead when Peter got to her? Or, did he, the snap of the web line snapped her neck, that whole thing.
Yeah.
What did it. And then on top of that, for it to go to the next issue, and then not only did Gwen die in the last issue, Peter's, enraged and trying to stop the Green Goblin dies in the next one.
Right.
To me, that one is like, again, you could argue that, you could argue about whether or not it was done for shock value, where they just were like, we got to kill somebody. Mm-hmm. But a lot of people point to that moment, and it's in Marvel's, the miniseries by Kurt Busiek and Alex Ross. It's almost a point of like when Gwen dies, it's almost kind of like the Marvel universe loses its innocence in a way.
Okay.
That's how it's often spoken of now, long after the fact.
Yeah, I just think also that like stunts kind of circling the idea of shock value all the time. Right? We're like, every time a Marvel stunt, or not even Marvel, really, I shouldn't say just Marvel, like anytime any comic book stunt is out there, right?
Sure.
It's a time when comic fans kind of peak to know, like, okay, something big's gonna happen here. Like something that is good, something that we're gonna, they're gonna try and throw something unbelievable at us here at some point in this, right?
Sure. Well, was it the three of us, Clifton and Zach and I, didn't we all go to the panel when they talked about Superman 75? That Superman panel where it was, a bunch of Superman creators, people that worked on Superman. Were we all in that panel together?
At the New York Comic Con?
No, this one we were in San Diego. We went for I think it was the second year we were all there together.
Okay.
Where it was the panel and they got to talking. It was Louise Simonson and Mike Carlin and Bruce Timm, and it was in the same room that we were in there early, because obviously if you don't get to a panel early in San Diego, you might not get in. It was one of those things where, like, I think Gillian Anderson was in the panel before, and then they brought in the Superman group. And I think George Perez might have been there too. But they basically talk about the idea of like, what's something we've never done with Superman before? And they're like, I know, let's kill him.
Right.
Right. And that's where they start to hatch the idea of Doomsday in those meetings. And then they start to whiteboard it, about what's going to happen in Adventures, what's going to happen in Action, what's going to happen in Superman, what's going to happen in tangentially in like Justice League and other books. And then, 75 is the big knockdown, drag out battle in Metropolis where Superman dies.
Right.
That's one of those shock values where I remember, I don't think I was working in the comic shop, but I remember going in and, people, it was one of those definite moments of people who didn't normally read comics coming in the comic shop being like, I have to buy Superman 75 because Superman's dead.
Right. Okay, so let me ask you this one, because this is an interesting one for me, because this was a thing that was announced before it happened, though. Also, right? Like,
right. True.
Like,
oh yeah.
Like it was in the news. I remember, like people very much knew DC was doing a story where they were going to kill off Superman, and then the book came out where it happened. This wasn't an instance where, you just picked up an issue of Superman and then like, what happened? Like Doomsday kills him.
Oh yeah, it was definitely like tipped their. They definitely flipped over their cards before it got there. But I think it's one of those, not that there haven't been moments or stunts or where big things happen, but you have that. That's one. Around the same time is getting back to Jason Todd, right? A 1-800 number to decide if Robin's going to die or not is a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
Again, it's pretty shocking to think that, if you could just get your buddies together and dial the phone enough times, you could decide whether or not, or the second Robin lives or dies.
And then your parents ask you what all those 1-900 numbers are about on the phone bill.
Yeah, and you got to explain that one. hopefully your grandma's not over at the time. And then you got to explain what a 1-900 number is.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's, to me, Superman 75, as much as I appreciate the fact that they put time and they wanted to make this moment, but, obviously it leads to, the reign of the Superman and all that stuff. But it's one of those where I think that's definitely a point where from that point on, the bigger the event, the bigger the stunt, because we get, like I said, we also have Jason Todd, and that also leads to Nightfall.
Right. Yeah.
And I don't want to just keep listing them because I want to talk about them individually, but.
No, I hear you. I'm just asking you guys also because like my love for Superman wasn't around then. Like the animated series was 2 years off at that point. Mm-hmm. That's when I fell in love with Superman. Was watching that show. So was there like a finality to it that was different from any other death in comics at that point, or was it still just kind of like the old comic trope of like, well, he's gonna come back? I mean, was there like a sense of unknown connected to that?
I mean, in a way there was. I think, it depended on, like, for me, it was, I was, I was not so naive to think that he would never come back, but it was definitely one of the things where I didn't think it would be quite as long as it was.
Uh-huh.
And eventually that's also one of the first times I had an event where I'm like, okay, this is probably going a little too long.
Right.
Anytime you're going to bring it back would be probably a good idea.
But I wonder if there's not like a bit of genius in that. The fact that the 4 Reign of the Superman stuff came out after that. Mm-hmm. Also, I wonder if that was meant as a means to be like, see, we're not going to bring them back because we got these characters now. We're going to use them, right? Oh, sure. I wonder if that was intentional and also just playing the joke long enough to make you go, maybe as a reader, go like, well, I guess maybe Clark's not coming back.
Yeah, I mean, they do don't get me wrong, they do a pretty good job with it to basically think, like, well, potentially one of these guys could be the new Superman. Mm. And that's what, going forward, that's what we got. But, it's still, I still think it was one of those things where people didn't, I think the public at large didn't know, but I think if you were in a comics for any length of time, you probably were like, all right, well, this is cool. I mean, granted, that's one of those books I remember where people are like, I'm putting away these books because I want to put my kid through college with them. Yeah. that kind of thing. And
yeah, definitely.
No, not so much.
Yeah. That was the height of the polybagged hologram, collector's edition variant cover stuff.
No, I was going to say, it's funny that that's the one that you find shocking. To me, the shocking one wasn't so much that they killed him or even resurrect him, because at the end of the day, I don't believe anyone thought for a minute that it'd be a final thing. The one that no one saw coming, in my opinion, is when they split Superman into red and blue.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, I'll go even a little bit before that, too, right?
Okay.
When they turned him into the electric blue Superman, too.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
No, that is, but that's sort of what I was speaking of. But that's basically, yeah.
Yeah, and then they split, and then they did the Superman red and blue storyline. I don't remember how many years after the fact, but they did that one as sort of a weird nod to a Silver Age Superman red blue story as well.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, that is what the Electric Superman was a reference to, too. It was Morrison referring to the old imaginary stories.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Right.
He cited it.
Right.
Yep.
In his Justice League run.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
So that was his doing? I never knew that.
He was on Justice League at the time. I don't know if it was initially his idea or not, but he was the one that kind of went with it.
Right, yeah. No, I remember. I remember he was the only one to make it cool.
Yeah, he does the most with it because there's the issue of like JLA early on. It's like, I think it's like 7 or 8, where they fight against the Demons 3 that are like these classic JLA villains that have been around since like the 60s, these 3 demons. But at one point, they're trying to make the moon collapse into the orbit of the Earth, and Superman, basically turns, using his powers, his new electric powers, wraps chains around the moon because that's where the watchtower is, and basically creates an electromagnet to repel itself from the Earth. So you have magic going on in this battle between magic and science, and it's one of the few times the electric powers actually work, where Superman does something that's like a Superman level.
Yeah,
But
that stuck around for a while too. I remember. I mean, that was at least, I want to say that was like 4 years. I remember.
It takes a while,
right?
Yeah, it does take a while to get back. But I mean, getting back to like Nightfall to me was one of those things where, it's a storyline where, again, you kind of know something's going to happen to Batman. They go a step further. I mean, granted, not like they don't introduce Bane or introduce Doomsday and Superman, but Doomsday is such like a force of nature. He doesn't have a personality.
Yeah.
There's no real motivation other than to destroy stuff, right?
Yeah.
It's almost like Superman fighting a hurricane. I mean, it doesn't really translate as much as Bane, where Bane they set up in the one shot, from being Santa Prisca, and he's paying for his father's sins, and he's, doing that whole hardcore, training in prison thing. And he knows he gets the idea of he wants to go to Gotham and challenge Batman. Right. So it's almost like, it's kind of like it's Bane's story before it's even Batman's story, really.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. No, it is a little bit different, but I think also, I think the fact that, that's what, a year out from Death of Superman?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah.
Around there. Yeah.
Yeah. There is, it's funny because it does smell a little unoriginal from that sense. Like we did it with Superman. Let's do it with Batman now.
Sure.
I say that, but that said, Nightfall's actually the better story.
Absolutely.
In my opinion. Nightfall actually as a stunt is actually pretty good.
Right.
I think. But I guess like tying back to what Tommy said, it's not so much that like the moment that is shocking to me. It's really more that they did it.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It's not that Superman dies and then comes back. It's just at the moment that they had the balls to sort of like, we're gonna do this,
right? And
at least momentarily make you think that it's final.
Well, granted, they're not killing Batman, but I remember the ads from the time was we're setting Batman someplace he's never gone before, and it was like away. Like that was the thing, was like, Batman's another character like Superman that's been around since the 30s at that point, and they're basically telling you, yeah, Bruce Wayne's not going to be Batman, for a while,
right?
And we get Asbats and a broken bat, and all that stuff.
Yeah,
and really, I just remember, there's one point where you see Bruce kind of harried from everything that Bane has thrown him because they destroy Arkham Asylum for like, I think it's maybe one of the first times they actually do it. I think there might be like an issue, like an anniversary issue, like 400 or something where all the Arkham villains get out over one night.
That's what my feeling. That's what I was remembering was the initial selling point of the book to me. Was that something happens where all the criminals in Arkham get loose at the same time, and like Batman has to fight them all.
Yeah,
right. I remember that was the big selling point. At first, which it was just a numbers game there. Like, how is he going to take on all of them?
Yeah, and he has that moment of like, how am I going to take them all? There's a bit with, there's a great bit with Scarecrow and Joker teaming up, which you don't really get. There's a lot of great bits in Nightfall. I say it's got a lot of shock value in it, but the idea that, again, Bane succeeds in his plan. It's not he succeeds in breaking the bat and then tossing him. But didn't he toss him down like the side of a building or something?
Yeah. Yeah, it's like throws him into like Gotham Square, like bloodied and beaten and battered.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and then then for a while it's Bruce Wayne is, you don't know if he's coming, he's got a broken back, and if he's coming back, and then Asbats, Azrael takes over, and and all that stuff. So it's kind of a as shock value, again, is something that they never really expected they were going to do, but they did it and pull it off pretty well.
Right. Yeah, so Nightfall, shock value, sure, but done well, pulls it off, is a story that has some legs to it, has some meat to it and everything. And it is actually like, set up books years down the road too. Like the fact that Bruce went to Azrael instead of Dick Grayson,
right,
set up their tension for like a decade. I want like pretty much. Maybe not quite that long, but half a decade, I'd say. Right? Like I remember, like you pick up like the Chuck Dixon Nightwing stuff, like that's really like the source of their tension,
right?
Is that, you know what I mean? Superman, Death of Superman, okay, to varying degrees and everything. So what about the other big '90s one, the Wolverine Bone Claws?
Oh yeah,
right. That was another one, right? We're like, okay, Magneto. It was almost a moment to me where like somebody realized that Magneto that has the power over metal, and Wolverine's made of metal essentially. Like, sure. Oh, wait a minute, like
there's something we can do with this.
He should be able to like just whip him around. Yeah,
right.
This was my moment of leaving X-Men though. So
Right. No, I mean, it was, I remember, was it Fatal Attractions? Is that what it's called? Is that the storyline?
Yeah. And I remember it was a hologram cover.
Right, of course.
Yeah.
But that was the thing, was they made a big deal of the fact that Wolverine was going to lose his adamantium. And then it was going to be, a situation where he didn't have it. And then, by the way, he had bone claws. And they had to explain that. And then for a while, Wolverine gets really feral looking, like doesn't have a nose or has a flat nose.
Yeah.
Like an animal does. Yeah, it's just kind of, it's one of those weird sort of like, we've had Wolverine around for a while, so we can start to mess with the foundation of the character and give you something different.
Yeah. It's weird for me because like I was so young when that happened.
Right.
And like at the moment, like hearing what they would do now, they essentially took Wolverine out of the X books, right?
Yeah.
And focused the X-Men books on other characters. Now that's way up my alley. Now I'm like, they don't do that enough. But then when I was, however old I was, 10, like the idea of like reading X-Men without Wolverine, I was like, I don't want to do that. Why would I want to do that? But it's also an instance of, I feel like I hear this come up online, like often now, where people are looking back at that story, remembering it kind of fondly.
Sure.
And I don't know if that's nostalgia. I don't know if there's just something there that I missed. Cause like I said, that was when I started really spotty reading X-Men at that point. But,
yeah. I just think it was one of those things where up at that point, it's almost like you said, it's an obvious moment of like, oh, the Master of Magnetism could do something with this metal in this one character. Why wouldn't we see this have happened before? But yeah, no, I mean, I remember, the time it was a big deal. People were fired up about it, because again, it was, you didn't have origin at that point. So there was still no real clue of to what was the deal with Logan or Wolverine. There was no real explanation. So anything was on the table at that point. So
yeah,
I think the one for me though, that when I think about the 90s stuff, when I think about storylines where they're like, we're just going to do something to a long established character, I think what they do with Hal Jordan is really, the one where I go, they really took a radical approach to what they decided for Hal, with him turning, well, I mean, granted, it's retrofitted by Jeff Johns later to be Parallax,
right?
But that whole thing of having him basically, the fallout of the death and return of Superman is that Coast City gets destroyed by Mongol, and as a result, Hal decides to go to the Guardian and say, well, I want you to fix it and return everyone to life. And, and they're like, well, we're not going to do that. And I don't think we can do that. And Hal says, fine, I'll gather the power and do it myself.
Right.
And Hal's killing Green Lanterns and taking their rings. And, spoiler alert, he kills Kilowog and he kills Sinestro. And at one point, there's that classic cover where he's got, all his fingers and his two thumbs are all have Green Lantern rings on them.
Yeah, and he's got like the crazed face.
Yeah.
And stuff. Yeah. So this was Hal's heel turn.
Yes.
Back in the 90s and everything. Yeah, and then but you were saying so he becomes a villain that goes by the name Parallax. Right. And then retcon years later when Jeff Johns gets on the book and brings Hal Jordan back, that Parallax is like an entity that possessed Hal Jordan.
Mm-hmm. Right, exactly.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to clear it up for if anybody was confused listening to that.
Yeah, it takes place. I mean, it came out in 1994. It was called Emerald Twilight, and it ran from issues 48 through 50. Right, and over the course of those 3 issues is where he finally, has that moment where he loses it, and just goes on this spree of just trying to amass all this power to try and basically bring back all the citizens and all of Coast City. And it's also the first appearance is of Kyle Rayner, who ends up being, the torchbearer, because there are no, there's no Guardians, there's no other Corps, it's just Kyle.
Right.
So, which is great, but it's one of those things where that to me, I remember the time being like, okay, that's it's a big thing to try to come back. But if you ever want to, bring that back from the brink of trying to reset Hal Jordan.
Right. Yeah. No, that's the hero turning into a bad guy. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's another one that gets used a fair amount later on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that to me was more, like the level that Hal goes to, the character goes through and that stuff is, when we talk about shock value, I think a lot of that is done, it is to that level to basically, put a big stamp on it to say, this isn't Superman dying. This isn't Batman turning, getting his back broken and being, turned away. This is, he's going to be a bad guy. He's basically, he's killed his friends. He's killed his worst enemy. And this is who he is now,
Right.
at least, for the foreseeable future.
So, I mean, as a card for writers and editors to use, I mean, is it an effective one that to you guys? Like, do you appreciate shock value, or does it feel cheap to you guys?
I mean, it depends on the meat of the story and how it relates to how it works. In some cases, it can be gratuitous, in which you don't care to hear it or see it. I mean, given examples of what they're doing right now with the Meadow books, that's nothing but shock value.
I agree.
Okay,
but yet there's a strong fan approach to it, in which people love it. It's redefining DC universe as we speak, with the mere inclusion of it.
Right.
Yeah, I mean,
that's a good one. That's a good example. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that one. Yeah, it's basically a shock value parallel universe.
Yeah, I mean, they're basically saying that this is the negative universe we never saw, in which all these examples were always there, but they're hidden behind the source wall, or whatever they want to explain it as. In which you got all these examples of the hero in a way we've never seen it before. I mean, Owlman was nothing compared to everything that's coming up behind it, right?
Yeah. Frank, Clifton, what do you guys think?
I'm, I don't mind shock value. I like to be surprised with stuff that I'm reading or watching. I think that's one of those things where it's, I just think sometimes it does reek a little bit of desperation on the part of the writer, because, for example, one that I don't think really works all that well is in Ultimate Spider-Man. Bendis was going at a pretty good clip. I mean, granted, it was kind of a running joke, the idea of like, wow, Peter Parker in the Ultimate Universe has dealt with, so much more than 16-year-old Peter Parker ever went through before it was all said and done, because they were just constantly, warping to all the touchstones in Peter Parker's life from the original 616. So I think to the point where they kill off Gwen in those books.
Yeah.
Because he had done such a great job about making her an interesting character and kind of her own thing, and kind of they made Mary Jane sort of the brainy character, and then she was sort of like the bad girl. And there was a nice balance between the two of why Peter might want to go with one of them or try to be with one of them instead of the other. And then I think it's during the Carnage, when they first introduced Carnage, I think, or is it Venom? I can't remember for sure.
No, it's Carnage.
Is Carnage?
Yeah.
And they kill her off, and it doesn't really. I guess it's meant to be shocking, or it's meant to be, a moment that you go, whoa. But instead, I think it just was like, I really liked Gwen, and it's not even it's an idea of, you kill off a character I liked. It's kind of like, why did you kill off a character I like?
Yeah. No, that's an interesting example. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that one, but I remember, when she gets killed off in Ultimate, I remember I kept saying to like people at the store and everything, I mean, I feel like that character had other stories left.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I did too.
And it is the thing with Gwen, right? Like ever since, what is it? Spider-Man 121? You said what?
Yeah,
120
I believe so. Yeah.
Anytime you use that character outside in any sort of adaptation, which Ultimate felt like that for a little while, that we're adapting Spider-Man in a different way, right? We're sort of updating it. Anytime you introduce Gwen, it's like the clock is ticking.
Sure.
Right? Everybody's thinking like, is this issue the one where she's going to die? Is this the one going to be the one that she dies?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, death and heroes turning villainous or tend to be, I think, the ones that comics fall back on a little bit. And I don't say that, casting any dispersions or negativity to either one. There are moments where I like those stories a lot. It's just, I'm with you guys that like it's got to feel natural in a way.
Mm-hmm. I will say this before you go into your complete statement. I'm sorry for interrupting. No. But to me, from the examples that you give and me thinking about it, it's almost as soon as you introduce extra dimensional stuff, there's going to be a shock. Like Frank, remember Invincible when we get the other dimensional Invincibles?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Where you get again what you said earlier, Zach, with the evil versions of a character and how evil can you make those versions of that character.
Yeah.
It's almost as soon as you introduce extra-dimensional stuff, there is going to be a huge shock of either a dead character who's not dead anymore, or a version of the hero, or excuse me, the version of a villain that resembles the hero. As soon as you introduce extra-dimensional stuff.
Mm. I thought you were talking, Tommy, about the reveal of Angstrom Levy in Invincible.
Oh, when he comes, yeah, that was a shock too.
Yeah. I mean, we could, Zach, are you planning to ever read Invincible? Are you going to read it at some point?
Yeah, I mean, I've read a fair amount of it and I enjoyed it. I would like to finish it up, but
okay,
by all means, go on.
Oh no, there's just a point where he's dealing with all this stuff with the character. Basically, it's all around the time of the interdimensional Invincibles, and he finally gets up with Angstrom Levy, who's been a pain, to him for a while, and basically they get into a physical confrontation, and you find out that while he may be like incredibly intelligent and almost like the leader, basically from Marvel level intelligence, he's not like super strong or invulnerable. So while Invincible's beating the crap out of him, you find out he's basically almost about killed him, right, Tommy?
Yeah, oh yeah, he's a irregular person. Yeah, he doesn't have that gamma irradiated skin like the leader has.
No, and so he basically starts to pummel him, and basically he's like, "Oh my God, stop! You're killing me."
Mm-hmm.
It's a moment of like, "Oh, never really." It's a nice bit because you never really considered that. So,
especially what he pulls off and the anger that it incites within our hero.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Invincible's got some good. I mean, I'd say Kirkman in general has got some really good. I mean, granted, if you've ever read The Walking Dead,
oh yeah,
Kirkman's got some amazingly shocking moments in that one. I mean, if you've read stuff with the governor, or spoiler if you've haven't read The Walking Dead yet, I'm about to spoil some of that stuff. Because it's not the same as the show. So, for example, like Lori and Judith don't make it out of the prison in Walking Dead. Right. Like they don't survive. I mean, Lori doesn't survive in the show, but in the comic book, they have a really horrible death. And when the governor comes back to call on our group, and a lot of those deaths are shocking. And it's one of those things where I when I think about Kirkman, I think about like those moments. I think he does it better in Invincible. I think Invincible overall is a better book. You can come at me all you want. But I think, for example, like Walking Dead, when it got to the end of the series, Kirkman said that he wanted the end of the book to almost be like a death of a character. Like he wanted to surprise you, the fact that, yep, that's it. That's all there is. And I just think it fell flat. I didn't really think it worked. You have a very big moment in the death of a character. I won't ruin that for you. Even got that far in the books. Some people might not have. But it's one of those things where there was still a lot of story, I think, left to tell. And it sort of takes a time jump at the end. So, do with that what you will. But I think that's one of the few instances where he just didn't quite land it properly. And he's usually really good. I know I've seen him in interviews and I've watched him and stuff. And he's basically said, kind of like Mark Waid does. He's one of those writers. It's like, let's just do this and then I'll figure out how it works.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if I could ever work that way, but I know like Mark Waid has often said, like when he's writing Daredevil, he's like, yeah, I would write myself Daredevil. I write Matt Murdock and Daredevil into a corner. And then the next month I'm sweating how I'm going to get him out of it.
Yeah. No, I love that about him. Yeah. I think, I mean, it sounds positively terrifying.
Yeah.
to write without a net like that. But yeah, no. Yeah. I mean, the funny thing with it in comics is though, I mean, these are 80-year-old characters in some cases, right? In constant publication, right?
Right.
Generally going to get passed on to somebody else once I'm done with it. So I think the shock value, like almost by necessity, has to get kind of bigger and has to kind of come out of nowhere a little bit more, right? Because we've seen so many stories.
Sure.
There's so many Batman stories, so many Spider-Man stories, there's so many Hulk stories there. So we have to kind of, I think in the name of trying to do something new and something entertaining, we have to get bigger and we have to kind of come more and more from left field from things.
Well, again, getting back to comics, thinking about, some of the bigger like shock value moments in comics to me. One that's really big that, that doesn't really get talked about much now, but like in the early 90s, getting back strangely enough, to Kyle Rayner was it's in volume 3, number 54, and again it comes out in 1994. It's the issue where Major Force has been fighting with Green Lantern, and I guess he figures out who he is, and he kills
I know you're referring to, yeah.
And he kills Alex, the Kyle Rayner's girlfriend, and dismembers her and puts her in the fridge.
Yeah.
That at the time and right after it's a huge thing because, like Gail Simone and some other women in fandom were like, why is it this trope of, in order to advance the plot for the male character, the female characters have to be murdered or raped or something awful. And again, that's one of those things where that's where the term of fridging somebody or putting a woman in a refrigerator comes from, is that story, that one issue in particular where, she is murdered by Major Force. So
it is definitely like an infamous, notorious moment in comics with that. Gail Simone 100% has a point.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah. Elektra. I mean, I love the Frank Miller Daredevil stuff, but Elektra, completely is that as well.
Yeah, yeah. Unfortunately,
yeah.
That's the other one that's more recent that still is pretty controversial, and it's definitely divisive in fandom is Identity Crisis.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I've told this story before in another podcast where I remember leading up to Identity Crisis, I'd seen Brad Meltzer at a show, and I asked him if he was working on anything in comics, and he did that, that thing of looking left and looking to the right to make sure that nobody else was listening. He's like, "Yeah, I'm working on this Justice League book, and I think you're going to love it."
Right.
And I was like, "Okay, cool. I like the Justice League. I like other stuff that you've written." And what he was talking about was Identity Crisis, and I remember there's a lot of controversy at DC about it. There was a lot of the whole thing with Dr. Light and his assault and rape of Sue Dibney, this character, this beloved character that had been around since, the Silver Age. Yeah. And the fact that, that people, have this, fondness and love for elongated man and Sue Dibney in the first place, that this happened to her while on the JLA satellite. Some people were just like emphatically like, no, there's no way this could happen. It's wrong. It should be, it should be taken out of comics. It should be taken out of, and it's one of those things where, and then some people were trying to say they sensationalized that happening in the first place. And it's just one of the things where, even now, if people bring that up, I was, one of the groups I belonged to was talking about it, and it was pages and pages of people debating the merits of whether or not it should even happen.
Right. Yeah. No, it's an infamous book to this day. Yeah. It's still controversial for sure.
Yeah.
For those moments. Yeah. 100%. All right, so to start wrapping up, though, do we have an instance of shock value that we would like to reverse if we were given the opportunity?
I have one.
Okay.
So again, along those lines of, we're talking about 90s books and they're trying to do, we didn't get to it actually in the podcast, but there's a moment during, J. Michael Straczynski when he was writing Amazing Spider-Man, there's a point where there's an issue in which it's basically spelled out. It's not even implied. It's basically spelled out that Norman Osborn and Gwen Stacy had a sexual relationship and produced children.
Right.
And it's one of those. It's disgusting. It's not plausible. It's just one of those things of, I don't know how it happened. Why anyone would allow, why an editorial would be like, yeah, that's something we should do.
Yeah.
It's bad enough that he again, murders or. I go with that as opposed to Peter, broke her neck with the spider line, with the webbing, and that one was one I would like as a shock value moment. I was like, it's terrible. I would just roll that back and be like, no, that never happened.
Yeah, no, that's the one that also that it's, in doing so, what that does is makes every issue of Amazing Spider-Man going backwards. It's like, oh, that in between panels, Gwen is having an affair with Norman Osborn that we're not seeing.
Right. And it's awful. It's so bad.
She's going from this party, hanging out with Peter, and then she's going to go to Norman's house.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Yeah, it's a bizarre decision. Yeah, I'm with you.
Good.
Tommy, Clifton?
There's a lot of weird ones right around that time in comics, because that led right into One More Day.
Mm-hmm.
Also, Straczynski, where Spider-Man makes a deal with the Marvel version of the devil, Mephisto, to save his elderly aunt's life at the expense of his marriage.
Mm-hmm.
and his whole relationship. But also, you also had Bendis's Avengers Disassembled.
Oh yeah.
At the same time, which ends with distraught Scarlet Witch declaring no more mutants and wiping out somehow all of the mutant population except for 198 people, which never made much sense to me at the time of the story because she is a mutant.
Right.
And
Right.
I mean, I guess that was supposed to be the point, but it still felt weird. And then it just felt like they had come up with an idea where they wanted to limit, like they wanted the mutants to be like a small thing, especially after Morrison had been expanding with, whole countries of mutants.
Yeah.
And I think they were trying to put that back in a bottle and came up with like the most clunky, awkward way to do it.
Yeah.
That's what I would rescind.
Okay. Yeah, I'm with you on that one too. Yeah, that one screamed that, Morrison had revealed basically that at some point, like in a few years in the future, the mutants were going to be the majority of the population on planet Earth. And it just felt so many like writers being like, well, what are we supposed to do with that then?
Right.
And then did it this way. Yeah. Yeah. No, good pick, Clifton. Tommy, what do you got?
Oh, for me, it'd be Walking Dead, I think issue 50.
Okay.
I don't care what story it is. It was my Portal Harbor. I don't care for infanticide. It's unnecessary. It's already a terrible world as is. You don't got to up the ante by letting things like that occur, let alone visualizing it. It's a very small scene in which it occurs, or one panel, but still, it was enough for me not to. I could take Scarlet Witch doing craziness, whatever, what have you. I can see Superman die, change, whatever. I wouldn't even stomach the refrigerator thing. That's terrible. no matter what you say. But I just thought it was unnecessary. It was a terrible world, and you didn't have to make it that much more vivid.
Okay. I am going to go with a movie, but a movie about a superhero. I'm going to pick the ending of Man of Steel.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Superman snapping Zod's neck. I cannot stand this scene. I have had hours of argument with people about this. About this. I'm sure I haven't had the last argument about this, but yeah, no, I think it is a gross misunderstanding of the character to put him in a situation like life and death situation. He's supposed to make the hard choice, right? And I'm like, well, he's only there because you wrote that situation for him,
right?
And not even wrote it well. I can think of 100 different outs for him in that situation in that world that don't result in him having to kill him. But,
right.
Yeah. No. On top of the fact that, and I also go to Superman doesn't need to be edgy. He doesn't. There's 100 of other edgy comic book characters out there and everything. So I mean, like you guys can get a flavor of that with so many other places. You don't have to make Superman follow suit with that. So
right.
I can do a whole episode on on just that ending. But that's my pick. So
it's a good pick.
Thank you. So that's shock value. We want to hear your thoughts on shock value in the comments. So tell us what you think. You can find links and examples of what we talk about on letmeknowhowitis.com. Don't forget, we take topic suggestions. If you have something you'd like us to discuss, tell us in the comments. Also, subscribe to us on YouTube. It will help the channel to grow. And don't forget to like us on Facebook at facebook.com/letmeknowhowitis and follow us on Twitter at our show's initials, LMKHII. Thanks for listening, and we will see you in a week.